Welcome to The Digital Footprint, a podcast for leaders in healthcare, public health, and education who are looking to leverage technology to solve problems and make a big impact. In each episode, we interview innovators and entrepreneurs who are solving the most challenging problems facing these industries. Join us as we dig into the colossal tasks involved in bringing a new digital product to life. Welcome to The Digital Footprint.
Hello, and welcome to The Digital Footprint. I'm Richard Sims, and this podcast is brought to you by Tyrannosaurus Tech, an award-winning technology partner dedicated to designing and developing high-impact software products. Today, I'm sitting down with James Oliver Jr., CEO and co-founder of Kabila, founder of the ParentPreneur Foundation, and more. Thanks for coming on the show, James.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, yeah, thank you for coming on the show. So you and I first connected a few years ago. You've always been a supporter of Tyrannosaurus Tech, which, of course, I really appreciate. And I've been really impressed with your entrepreneurial spirit because you have a few different organizations that you're running. And it seems like a lot of your focus with those is on supporting entrepreneurs, particularly founders of color, parents that are founders, and kind of being very open about the struggles of starting a new business, which I can also appreciate, of course. So I'm excited to dig in a bit more today on what you're working on and what's driven you to be so invested in this space of supporting founders. So to start us off, if you would, just briefly introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your latest venture.
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, I'm James, co-founder of the world's cutest twins, Zoe and Thaddeus. Disagree with me, I will fight you. They'll actually be 10 years old, a single dad of twins, and I guess I'm a 3-time founder. Now, I launched my first startup, which failed back in 2013, WeMontage.com. I mean, website's still around, but it's basically a zombie. You can still go and order, but WeMontage.com is the world's only website that lets you turn your digital images into removable photo wallpaper. Brilliant product, never caught on. And then during COVID, I started the ParentPreneur Foundation, which exists to empower Black parentpreneurs so they can leave a legacy for their beautiful Black children. So that's a nonprofit. And recently I started Kabila, which is an inclusive co-founder matching app and global community for tech startup founders. So, it's because of the work that I was doing in the ParentPreneur Foundation as I was sitting in these spaces with these really influential people, limited partners, managing billions of dollars, trying to figure out how to crack the systemic code and challenges and get more capital to emerging venture capitalists to then write checks to underrepresented founders like myself. And despite, the conditions on the ground being specifically, you look at Q3, Black founders getting 0.43% of VC funding, women founders continuing to get less than 2%. Despite that terrible news, because as I like to say, when VC gets a cold, underrepresented founders get COVID.
Yeah.
We don't get pneumonia, we get COVID, right? But despite all that negative information, I really saw there's a lot of smart, influential people working really hard to change the problem. Again, NASDAQ, IDIF, IDIF.co is a nonprofit group of limited partners. And then look at Techstars, the JP Morgan partnership, $80 million there. And so the other thing is that people don't necessarily know is founder teams made up of more than one gender, race, or ethnicity will actually give their investors a 30% return. And I just had lunch today. Well, she was just hanging out. Anastasia, she's an investor principal from Techstars Atlanta. We were just talking about this, and she was just like, well, LPs don't care. And I was like, you're right. That's why we have the problem we have now, but some do, right? And more are. So the dam's not broken, but we're starting to see cracks in the dam. So eventually, I'm betting the next 10 years of my life, right? I just went through Techstars Austin with Kabila. I'm betting that LPs will demand that VCs invest some of their money in these inclusive co-founder teams, right? Because if it's true that they can get higher returns, and you're not doing that, it's a fiduciary issue there, I believe. I'm not an expert in that space, but that makes sense to me. So we are skating to where we think the puck's going to be. And when things change, Kabila will be at the epicenter of the most badass, inclusive co-founder teams in the world.
That's awesome. Yeah. And, I know just based on what you just shared and reviewing the website, obviously there's this fundamental kind of challenge for a lot of founders to find that right co-founder. And I meet founders as well that, feel very stuck. I will say I've always had a co-founder in businesses that I've started and have found it incredibly helpful along the journey. I mean, obviously having someone who's has complementary skill sets, but also just someone there in the trenches with you, more or less emotional support,
Right. And you can't do it all yourself. That's the other part.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So look, I'll say
sure.
this. Not everybody needs or wants a co-founder. You don't have to do that, right? You can be successful as a solo founder. The reasons you just said, those are good reasons to get one. The other thing is, if you go back to, I think it's like 2005, and you look at all the unicorns, 80% of those were started with more than one founder. So if you want to build $1 billion business and make a dent in the universe from that standpoint, you actually need a co-founder. The data is pretty clear. The problem is 70% of the founders we talk to who want a co-founder are having a hard time finding one. So there are a few tools out there, but they're all just nibbling around the edges. No one is focused on inclusion. So we're going to go hard in the paint to solve this really difficult problem. And, a focus on inclusion is kind of going to be our secret sauce. We have this global community of tech startup founders in which we pay for founder mental therapy, which I got inspired to do that from the work I do in the ParentPreneur Foundation. Historically, mental health is stigmatized in the Black community. In my ParentPreneur Foundation community, we paid for 320 mental therapy sessions. And of all the things that we've done, in addition to giving $100,000 in grants and paying for virtual assistants for our members and getting people featured in the NASDAQ tower in Times Square and paying for virtual tutors for their kids and all this stuff we've done, it's remarkable. But of all the things, the thing I'm most thankful for is the paying for the therapy, because I've heard from people how that impacted their lives and how they show up as a parent and how they show up as entrepreneurs. And it's not just about, leave a legacy for their beautiful Black children. When you say that, you're thinking financial. It's just a legacy of wealth, but it's also a legacy of mental health and mental wealth that we want to pass on, because, if the theory of epigenetics is true, which is, this is theory that your trauma attaches itself to your DNA and you pass it on to your descendants. If that's true, Black folks, we got 400 years of trauma baked into the DNA that we need to find a way to undo so we don't continue to pass that along. So I'm just super excited about that work that we're doing. So we do that in the in Kabila community as well. And we have a great relationship with Wiggin and Dana. It's a national law firm. And every month we open up for 5 members of our community to get free legal services for minority and women founders, LGBT plus founders. And if you get accepted, like no one has not been accepted, you just, you can't be in a position where you could pay for it yourself. They will take you on. Like we just got a woman last month. She got picked up. They're going to do about $14,000, $15,000 worth of trademark work for her. I mean, that's really making an impact for the entrepreneurs in our community. So super excited to be doing that work. We are building the prototype right now. So Caleb Martinez, who's my CTO, Caleb went to Georgia Tech. He actually played football for a year. He was a walk-on offensive lineman. Yeah, he's crazy. I don't mess with him. I mean, I do mess with him. Picking on him is my favorite thing in the world to do, but I don't.
Not too much.
Yeah, not too much, because he's a little crazy offensive lineman. He's like the Hulk too. He looks like the Hulk. He's crazy. But so we're building that, and our plan is this Friday to have it to a point where we could start getting some users on it, getting feedback. And when we got to Techstars Austin back in the end of August, we stopped developing our app, because we were making all these assumptions about what we thought we should build. And instead of making all these, with all these unvalidated assumptions, building based on that, we stopped. We spent the whole time talking to customers, which, that's the right thing to do, but it's also kind of scary because why? Because the ground was shifting below our feet the entire time. So we get out of Techstars, right? And I jokingly say, not really jokingly, but I tweeted it this morning. Today's pre-seed investor is last year's seed investor.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So we get out of Techstars and, the first thing, well, what kind of track, how many users you have? What's your product? I'm like, I don't have a product. I spent 10 weeks, 11 weeks talking to customers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So now we're going to go build a kick-ass product that we think people will want based on incredible user feedback we got, right? We talked to dozens and dozens and dozens of people. We did a virtual co-founder matching event, which allowed us to validate a bunch of our assumptions that we had. And so now we're ready, we're building, but then when you're trying to raise money because you got to keep eating so you can keep building, and investors are like, well, where's your app? How many customers? What kind of traction? Bro. But if I had to do it all over again, I would, do it exactly the same way because I'm confident now that we're going to build something that people want.
Yeah. Well, definitely the extended customer discovery, I think, can be tedious, but certainly pays off on the back end. That's awesome. So, I think everything you're sharing is very cool, very interesting. I think that, mental health for any founder, I think, is a struggle, and it's historically not discussed that much. But, especially if you're underrepresented and having to overcome those barriers as well, or you have little kids or you're a single parent. So I think it's very cool with Kabila, just kind of multifaceted support system that you're building there. One thing coming into this, although I explored the website, I'm not very familiar with, what's kind of being worked into a product versus what are not services, but just like part of the network or preferred relationships you all provide. So I know obviously there's the co-founder matching aspect, which in theory, could be just like curated by reviewing who else is a part of the network, but it sounds like that's probably being facilitated through the app. There's obviously stuff like the mental health support, access to attorneys.
So that's in the community. Like, the second part is in the community. So it's two things. Is the co-founder matching app, which is like Bumble for co-founders, right? With a little inclusion sprinkle on top of it. And then we have a community where we have these events. We give founders access to the most influential investors and people in the startup ecosystem. Because look, here's the thing that a lot of founders, especially new founders, don't understand. They don't understand that investors invest in lines, not dots. You don't just get to show up off the street. The majority of the time, there's always some exceptions, right? But you don't just get to show up and get a check. You need to build trust with people, and you need to have several touch points. And that's one of the things I tell people. So like last week, we had Tanaka Mwindi, who's the investment associate from the Techstars New York City JP Morgan Accelerator. She was doing an AMA, and it was awesome. Like we had all these people on there, it was live stream. And I was telling people like, look, guys and gals, if you want to apply to this accelerator, I asked Tanaka a question. I said, Tanaka, how many applications do you think you're going to get for this program being in New York City? She said, probably 1,000. How many startups will you accept into your next class? 12. So if you want to apply, you're not just going to submit what you think is a dope application and get in. Why? Because they already have relationships with founders, right? They have people from their network whom they trust, who are referring people and then if you're a solo founder, you probably won't get in. In my class at Techstars Austin, we had 2 out of 12 solo founders, and they were amazing. But I'm going to tell you, it was 3 of us, and I was drowning in terms of all the work that we had to do. So I don't know how those 2 solo founders did that. So, but the point is, if you go with something like that, follow up. She gave them her email address, and I told them, if you're going to send an email, put in the subject, follow up from the Kabila conversation with James, whatever, something that she would open. Thank her for her time. Reference something that she said that was meaningful to you, and put a link to your website and let her know you will be applying to our program. That's it. So now you're on her radar, right? You got to do that enough times to build trust, to turn the dots into lines, and give yourself a chance to get those next opportunities.
For sure. And I think there is a lot of times for first-time founders, there's some naive perceptions of fundraising, right? No matter what industry you're in, or in some cases, even what stage you are at with the business, we know, of course, that one, there's a ton of rejection. There's a ton of barriers to even get access or eyes on what you're doing. And that it's also, a full-time job. I mean, I think that can, of course, be a big challenge for founders is like your focus on the customer or the product or wherever you are in that journey is largely derailed for a lot of that time when you're looking to fundraise,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. It's not easy, man. We're doing it now, but this time of the year, everybody's shutting down, right? But I'm still accessing relationships, still sending emails. We're talking to angels right now. We think that when we get back in January, the conversations with institutional investors will start to heat up again. But right now, reaching out to angels. So
yeah, and I'm sure that there's of course a lot of anxiety and uncertainty about the markets next year and inflation. I feel like
I'm
adds
not
a
paying
whole
attention to any of that.
Challenging element.
I'm not paying attention.
Yeah.
You can't.
There's nothing we can do about it. So
you can't.
I think just focus on your fundamentals.
That's it. You can't. And look, the last recession, some great companies were started from the last recession. Airbnb, Pinterest, Uber. I mean, there's a big list of companies like that started during the last recession. Mm-hmm. And you just got to keep your head down. It's a numbers game. You need to have enough productive activity. Productive being the key word there. Don't take rejection personally. Try to learn from every experience and do better the next time. And, if somebody passes on you, just add them to your investor updates. I did a Kabila conversation a couple weeks ago with Matt, who's the CEO of Paper Street. So we use Paper Street, paperstreet.vc. We use that for our investor updates. And we were talking about how to send good investor updates and why you should do that, and how, even though it seems like nobody's paying attention, you actually are connecting dots and building trust with people. And you will get a surprise email out the blue telling people from somebody who's been on your list saying they want to write you a check. Because that actually happened to me with my first startup. So I know it works. But Matt was like, yeah, if you meet an investor, don't even ask. Just throw them on your investor update list. I love the gangster.
I love it.
Just do it. Don't even bother to ask. Just add them to the list. They can unsubscribe if they don't want it.
Right.
Don't ask for permission.
Good advice.
Just do it.
So on your website, and then of course earlier you referenced this, like benefits of having a diverse set of co-founders. I've had 2 co-founders in the past, and it has been a diverse team each time, which was not necessarily intentional, but it was great. And I've had great partners and feel like really benefited from, just varied experiences or perspective. But can you expand a little bit on, why you believe that's so advantageous, why the numbers tell that story? Like, what do you think what's really going on there that gives those folks an edge?
Yeah, I just think it's diverse perspectives. Like if you have homogenous experiences, you're missing opportunities and perspectives and viewpoints. It's just, you're not doing as great as you could be. Like, I love that Caleb is significantly younger than I am. He's raised here in the South. I'm raised in the North. He's first generation Colombian American. I'm Black American. And we have these different perspectives. Like all the time, I love when, we don't always agree. And I love that. Mm-hmm. It just, so when we start talking about it, we end up with a richer, just a more robust output after we have what I like to call this creative tension. Mm-hmm. I love the creative tension. Some people might not like it, but I love it. I think we get to a much better result when we have creative tension.
Yeah, for sure. So how did you 2 get connected? I know you said he was at Georgia Tech. Mm-hmm. Is he more of the engineering background? Like, how do you all's skills complement each other?
He was a full stack engineer at NCR. So yeah, he's a full stack developer. We met, so one of Techstars' mantras is give first. And I can tell you that the success I've enjoyed the last few years is specifically because of give first. I mean, giving first is how I started the ParentPreneur Foundation. Giving first is how I actually got into Techstars Austin. So when Techstars JP Morgan Women's Founder Catalyst Program, that's a mouthful, sorry, they came to Atlanta. I got introduced to the woman who was running that program by email. And then my first thing is, how can I help? Right. So I have this LinkedIn Live show. I say, I'll have you on my show. I'll introduce you to my foundation community, and I'll blast you out to my network on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So they opened applications. A bunch of people from my community applied. Out of 20 women founders, I think 4 or 5 members from my community actually ended up getting in. It's amazing. Right. So then I was collaborating with that same group of people. They were doing a demo day, a pitch event on stonks.com. You familiar with Stonks?
Yes, I think so, just based on the name.
Yeah, Stonks,
Can infer, but not specifically.
Stonks.com is like, I think they say it's if, Stonks is if Twitter, Shark Tank plus Twitch plus something else had a baby. Anyway, it's just live stream pitching to investors. You get deal flow, blah, get people commitments, interest. So we were doing that over on Stonks, and it was, we called it Galentine's Day takeover of Stonks. First time ever on Stonks. It was all women entrepreneurs, all Black women entrepreneurs pitching on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
So we did that, and then their program ended, and they had their demo day. And I went to demo day, and one of the women from my community who went through that program, who's like doing great right now, she's raised over $1 million. I went to her room, and a guy showed up in her room, and I met him. And then a couple months later, I got an email from him, and my memory is horrible because I have young kids and not as smart as I used to be. My memory is terrible. And so he's like, oh yeah. I was like, oh yeah, okay. So I was like, well, what are you working on? He told me. I said, well, why don't we chop on a call, see if I can be helpful. I said, here I go again, being helpful. So at the time I was looking for a technical co-founder, and he asked me, so what are you working on? I said, I'm working on Kabila. He said, oh, I actually think I have the perfect person for you. I'm like, wait, what? Caleb used to work for him, and he was a mentor for Caleb. So he vouched for him. That's how I met Caleb.
Nice.
Because I was helping him.
Yeah, that's great. And you kind of never know where it's going to come from. So
that's how I met you, bro. You helped the ParentPreneur Foundation. I think you made a donation to the foundation. That's how we met.
Yeah, I think
community,
you're right, although I don't remember the specifics.
A community bucket
maybe that's what I was thinking, like through community bucket.
Yeah.
Or at least I connected you with them. Yeah, totally, man. And yeah, I know just the way you communicate with me periodically, I think there's never an angle or agenda. It's just
never
goodwill. And I think that's
it, man.
Stuff comes around for sure. Well, cool. So let's see here. So you've obviously had a business as a solo founder. Mm-hmm. You've, of course, had a business with a co-founder. And now, of course, with Kabila, you're facilitating this kind of matchmaking. So based on your experience, what do you think are the key ingredients to a successful co-founder relationship? Like, what should founders be looking for in that?
So if anybody's on Twitter, although I don't know how much longer I'm going to be in that. It's just too much nonsense going on over there. But you can find me. I'm at James Oliver Jr., James Oliver Jr. on Twitter and on Post as well. But I posted this the other day on Twitter because I always drop like these little things. Although half the time on Twitter, I feel like I'm screaming into the void, but I don't care. I just say what I said. Damn it.
Yep.
So I posted on Twitter, for a co-founder, I need to like you, I need to trust you, and we need to be able to execute well together. If any one of those three things is a no, the co-founder thing is a whole no for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like you, trust you, can we execute together? There's lots of other things to consider, right? But for me, it just boils down to those three things.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a huge decision. Like again, based on my experience, believe in having a co-founder, but I also think you do have to be very careful because I think it's an overused comparison, but it is kind of like going into a marriage.
That's where the trust thing comes in, right?
Yeah. And if it's a long-term thing, the business that is, which you hope it is, that relationship, is going to be hard at times or strained at times. And, there's various ways to kind of protect yourself, of course, but ultimately it's a pretty sticky thing to try to unpack if you can't find a way to get along,
Yeah. Do I like you?
Mm-hmm.
Do I like you? And, it's trust. Like, I was joking with Caleb this morning. He was so tired because he was grinding all weekend on the app. And he said he didn't get to bed till 4 a.m, which that's not normally what he does, but he was just in the zone, I guess, right? So he was a little sleepy. And he was a little grumpy this morning. We had our morning stand up and he was grumpy. And I was like, man, this is a side he had never seen before, but I was laughing at him. He was so grumpy. I was just like, but that's because I like him and I trust him, right? I didn't take any exception to that. And we still had a good call. We got it done and we keep it moving. He'll take a nap and he won't be so grumpy tomorrow.
Well, and clearly he trusts you enough to just not hide how he's feeling either, which is,
I love that dude. I do, but we were in the trenches together at Techstars and So the other thing I will say is in terms of a co-founder is it has to be like mission and values alignment.
Yeah.
That's really important.
That's what I was going to say too. And I think it's not easy to nail that stuff down because some of the values stuff can be hard to put your finger on or articulate. But I think just having generally aligned values in every sense of the word is really important. And I also think some of that translates just to like, kind of what you want in your lifestyle. Okay, you're doing a startup. It's kind of assumed you're going to work hard, but like, what really are the expectations there? Like
I gotta be clear about all
I will
that.
sometimes reference, and this has just kind of happened. It of course wasn't intentional, but like my partner Carlos and I, when we started the business, I guess he was already married, but newly married. I wasn't married yet. I got married. We both started having kids like right around the same time. So we've got each 2 little kids that are about the same age. And again, it wasn't planned, and you can't plan for that stuff, but it's been really great having those big life changes coming alongside together because obviously we understand what the other person's going through and we have infinitely more empathy for like, if someone's tired or a kid is homesick and some of those things, like even my previous founder in my old business, she had her first kid when we were still working together. And of course I was supportive and tried to, be as accommodating as I could. But looking back, I'm like, oh, I had no idea like what they were really going through with a newborn at home. You just kind of don't know until you're in it. So some of that stuff, I think just where you're at in life, again, you do want to, of course, have diversity there too. But I think that can be helpful, like whatever form that takes, Cool. So you talked a little bit about Techstars. I know obviously it sounds like a lot of it was hitting customer discovery really hard. I'm sure they're, again, challenging any and all assumptions that you and Caleb came in with. But what were kind of your biggest takeaways from that experience, either specifically about Kabila or just like how you would approach new ventures in the future?
Just doing the customer discovery thing above all else, like that was transformative for me. That is the way I would approach any new venture in the future. And I would encourage anyone out there listening to us who wants to start something to go talk to customers, right? Build a minimum viable product, emphasis on minimum, emphasis on viable. And then put it in front of some customers and don't ask them for feedback. Ask them for the sale. So I have a great relationship with Seth Godin, a marketing aficionado, just do the work that I do in the foundation. He's been very supportive of the foundation. But Seth said, don't ask for feedback, ask for the sale. I was like, mind blown, right?
I love that.
So
that's awesome.
Build something, get in front of them and see what they will pay for. Like ask them to pay for something. So, but I will say for us, our model is just a freemium model. Like it's just like Bumble or Tinder. You can go in there, anybody can use the app, but there's a suite of premium features you can pay for. But as we're just getting this thing built and just trying to figure out how people interacting with it, we're going to make all the features free to start. And then we'll figure out which ones people are using the most and have conversations with them and then determine which ones to charge for and how much to charge for them. But that, that's a little different, but I feel like people always want to ask for feedback, but if you have something that's built already, like ask for the sale, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you have just like a product, just ask for the sale.
I love that. And I think there's good, like I saw some in the same vein advice, like about if you're demoing something, it's like one thing you can experiment with is like never tell them the name of the product or where to get it. And then at the end, see if they ask you those things. And you can get a sense of like what their intentions really are versus,
right?
Yeah, I would pay for this. This seems great. It's like, but are you proactively trying to figure out how to make that?
Are they like, take my money?
Right.
That's what you want.
That's where you want to be. So shoot for the stars, land on the moon, I guess, more often than not. All right, cool. So with Kabila, I think you've been at it about a year.
Kind of.
I mean, it all dovetails into all your experience, of course, but is Kabila itself older than that?
Not really. So I incorporated really, once we got into Techstars, like this summer is when I really started jamming on things, so.
Yeah, so it's pretty fresh, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So what have been your biggest challenges so far? I mean, I'm sure the Techstars experience itself was challenging, but, part of the goal of this show, of course, is for folks that might be listening and are thinking about starting a new business or a nonprofit or whatever that is, just understanding, the highs, the lows, the hard parts, like what's been hardest for you so far with Kabila?
So, I have eliminated words from my vocabulary like struggle, hard, because what I found is, a funny thing happened when I eliminated the word struggle from my vocabulary. I stopped struggling.
It was that easy?
I mean, yeah. What you appreciate appreciates, right? What you focus your attention on, it expands. So, I was traveling every single week. I would leave on Monday and I flew back home on Thursday and, to come home and co-parent my children. So some people are like, oh, that was a lot. Well, I'm not saying it was a little, but a lot compared to what? To not launching Kabila and not being plugged into the incredible Austin startup ecosystem and building an amazing relationship with the Techstars team there. It went by so fast. The only thing that was hard about that is the coach seats on the Delta plane was destroying my back. It was like a couple weeks when my back was just I was in so much pain. That was the only thing that was hard about it. But other than that, it was great.
Well, you've got a good attitude. I can appreciate that. So flipping the narrative, what have been some of the biggest wins? Like, are there folks that have met through you all that you see, on the way to do big things? Like you obviously referenced, some founders getting like that legal support, things like that. What stands out in your mind?
Yeah, just that, right? And then so David Cohen, who's Techstars co-founder, came and did a Kabila conversation with us. So first of all, our community is not free. It's $19.79 a month. And we're probably going to be raising that price, right? Why? Because as I like to jokingly, but not jokingly say, because freedom ain't free. No, but in all seriousness, we're doing amazing work in that community, building community and pouring into founders. And I learned from my work with the ParentPreneur Foundation is that people value what they spend their money on. So you send a signal with your pricing and, if you're going to be delivering excellence, your pricing should reflect that. So one of the things, David came and we did a Kabila conversation and he did this talk about how to overcome investor objections. And actually the replay is in the community. If you're a founder and you're raising capital from institutional or angel investors, you gotta tap in and watch that thing. And he did role playing. And after he left, we did some role playing on our own and just overcoming investor objections. And 2 days later, I got a text message from somebody who was in the role playing, said she used the techniques we were practicing and she got a $250,000 commitment from an investor.
Wow. That's awesome.
So stuff like that is so good, man. So good.
Yeah. Well, obviously, there's such big potential implications for helping some of these founders get over a particular hurdle. I'm sure they have big visions. So it's one difference in that conversation could make such a big difference long term, That's awesome. So where do you see Kabila in 5 years, 10 years?
Oh, man. Bro. Oh, boy. We will, as I said at the top, this is all changing. The landscape. We're skating to where the puck is going to be, where we think the puck is going to be. And when we get there and things change and inclusive co-founders are just killing it around the world, we're going to be in the middle of it, connecting them, investing in them, and getting acquired. I envision we'll get to $100 million in revenue or more and, get acquired for hopefully $1 billion. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Well, I believe it, and I'm excited to see it happen. So last thing I'll ask you, because I always like to ask this of founders, first-time founder, thinking about, taking on something new, what's the one or two pieces of advice that you think is applicable to anyone kind of at that crossroads?
Yeah, don't chase money, because if you think you're going to start a startup because you're going to get rich, you're going to be sadly mistaken. So the very first Kabila conversation we did was with Brad Feld, who is Techstars co-founder and managing partner of the Foundry Group. And Brad was talking about he invests in, a lot of people say, what's your passion? What's your passion? Brad said, no, he's not interested in your passion because passion is emotion and emotions wane. He said he wants to know, what are you obsessed about?
Mm.
What are you losing sleep over? Right? So what are you obsessed about?
Mm-hmm.
And like for me, I always like to say, Mark Twain said the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you figure out why. So like, go figure out why you were born and go do that.
That's great. That's great advice. Well, looks like we're about out of time. I really appreciate it. This has been fun. Thanks for coming on. So before we sign off, where can listeners go to connect with you and learn more about Kabila, and what can they do to support your mission?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I'm at James Oliver Jr. on Twitter. Kabila's at Join Kabila on Twitter. Join Kabila on Instagram. Kabila on LinkedIn. We're Join Kabila on TikTok, which is kind of nuts. I'm doing some funny stuff over on TikTok. I have this segment. It's called Talking Tech with Tyrone. And Tyrone's my drunk alter ego. So I got this crazy Afro wig on. And Tyrone
I got to check that out.
Oh, bro. Like Tyrone is the managing director of the Techstars Decelerator program. And he's giving founders advice to decelerate their startups.
That is awesome.
The last one
be
yeah,
enough to get me on TikTok once and for all.
The last one I gave Elon Musk some advice about who he should hire as his next CEO, and that was 2 weeks ago.
That's
silly.
awesome.
But yeah, you can find us over there. Or you can go to joinkabila.com is the website. And if you're looking for a co-founder, you can click on the app page there and get on our wait list to get notified when we launch the app, which will be pretty soon here. So there's that.
Awesome. Well, this is great. I think it's awesome what you all are working on, and wishing you nothing but success. And I'll keep an eye on, as you all are progressing, how it's going. So thanks so much, James. And I'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Richard.
Thank you for listening to The Digital Footprint. This show is brought to you by Tyrannosaurus Tech, an award-winning technology partner dedicated to designing and developing high-impact software products. If you like what you heard in this episode, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For show notes and access to all episodes, please visit tyrannosaurustech.com/blog. Digital Footprint.